as we review some of the key moments from this trial, I want to bring in my guest for this afternoon, Marni Jo Snyder. She joins us via Skype. And Marni, you were with us as this verdict came in late Friday. As we review some of the prosecution's openings, I have to say I call this trial wrong. I didn't think the prosecution had a very strong case here.
I agreed through some of it. I think that the problem was that they had circumstantial evidence, but how meaningful really was that circumstantial evidence? How meaningful is it that they find the weights when that's something that you might use to go fishing? So I think that what happened is they wanted to present a ton of evidence. Really what they had is Brian Winchester, and you had to take his word for it with the little things that they found that could corroborate his claim. There wasn't any corroborating evidence that this is what happened. They didn't catch her confessing. They didn't catch her in any sort of plot. And I didn't think they were going to be able to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, but they were able to for that jury.
Exactly. Well, let's listen now. We heard from the prosecution. Let's listen a bit to the defense's openings as well. And I think the defense made some pretty good points both in the openings as well as those closings, but Marni Jo Snyder wasn't enough to take them to their goal.
I mean, apparently not. I really liked it that he kind of explained that this investigation put stuff together after Mr. Winchester said it, that there is no physical evidence that connects her at all to this crime. There's much more motive for Mr. Winchester to hate her and lie to get her in trouble than there seems to be for her to kill her husband despite the insurance policy. So I really thought they were going to be able to pull out the defense on this one and find reasonable doubt.
Well, I like taking viewers through this because, you know, when we have these opportunities to really dive deep into these trials, we pick the best of the best testimony throughout the whole trial, and then we are allowing viewers to decide for themselves whether they think Denise Williams really did conspire with Brian Winchester to kill that man, Mike Williams, who was her husband. Of course, they're saying the motive was love and money, insurance money. But you have to, as viewers, have to look at what the evidence is. And a big part, a key part of what the prosecution has is Brian Winchester's testimony. So when we come back from break, we're going to analyze that. We're going to play you some key moments, and you decide for yourself if he's a liar or if he's telling the truth. Stay with us. And that is some very interesting testimony there. Brian Winchester detailing what he did the day that he shot and killed Mike Williams. At first, he pushed him off the boat thinking he would drown. That didn't go as according to plan, so he was forced to shoot him in the head. Marni Jo Snyder, this guy was in tears, very emotional during this testimony. Do we buy it that he was that emotional about what happened 18 years later?
I mean, I've seen witnesses get upset at what seems to be an inopportune time or something that might not make sense to me. And there's so much that we can forgive a witness for having their emotion. You know, we don't know what's going on exactly in their head or their heart at that moment. But I thought this was very strange crying. You know, he was crying, but then in the middle stopped and said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys this."
Yeah, that was really weird when all of a sudden it's not like I forgot to tell you about something leading up to 3 days before the murder. It was literally something he forgot to tell investigators about the minutes before the murder. It just came to him on the stand.
Right. And for an immunity deal, they've interviewed him multiple times.
Right.
He did not tell someone once about this and they threw him on the stand.
That's why this case to me is so crazy, is that it's all hinging on what he said tying Denise Williams to the case. There would be no case against Williams right there if it wasn't for Brian Winchester. So let's see how he ties Denise Williams to what happened. Let's listen. So he's tying Denise Williams to this entire murder plot. There's a couple of things that I don't understand, and this is a picture of Denise and their daughter and Mike back when they were happy before this all happened. So my question is this. The first, I mean, maybe I live in an alternative universe here, but like, why did she think killing this guy was her only option? That's what Brian Winchester testified to. Marni, he said that she wanted out of this marriage, but couldn't get a divorce, and she felt like this was the only way. But that doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, what makes even less sense is that he can't explain what this woman's motivation was, despite the fact that they were totally in love and talked about this all the time. So if someone really can't get a divorce for some reason, you would think that they would have explained that to him why, right? Because we know there's cultural things, but he said for some reason she thought that she couldn't get a divorce. He says things that are so contradictory that he couldn't take away, he could let someone kill his wife, he couldn't take away his child's mother, but he's perfectly willing to kill her child's father when he supposedly loves her. And then did you notice that he doesn't use the word love? He says we want to be together. He didn't say I love this woman and I couldn't live without her and I couldn't imagine my life without her. He says we wanted to be together so badly that I was willing to kill my best friend.
So bizarre. Okay, we got to take a quick break, but we're going to take a deep dive into what evidence, if there's any, that actually backs up Brian Winchester's story. When we come back, also, I'll tell you what's coming up on the Daily Debrief. Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody. Another packed day here on the Law and Crime Trial Network. But first, before we dive into our cases, I want to bring in Daily Debrief host Aaron Keller. He's standing by to give us an update on what to expect on his show coming up.
Rachel, good afternoon. Tonight on the Debrief, starting at 5 o'clock Eastern, we're going to look back at the Denise Williams verdict. Thank you to those of you who stayed up late with us here on the Law and Crime Network to listen to that verdict come in after about 8 hours worth of jury deliberation. We will hear from the defense and hopefully the prosecution on their reaction to what happened. Also, Larry Nassar back in the news today, the former Michigan State University gymnastics doctor who admitted guilt in a series of sexual assaults for gymnasts over a period of years. Well, we know that he's been complaining about the judge in his case. An appeals court is now saying it really wants to listen to his complaints. Plus, trial date is set for a Texas man who's turning into a bit of a show-off and a mugshot. We'll show you that coming up on the Debrief at 5 o'clock.
And Aaron, thank you so much for staying late with us on Friday. But I got to ask you your definition of late, because I think that was around 7 o'clock. So it wasn't exactly midnight. What time do you go to bed?
That's late for us.
It is. All right. Thanks so much, Aaron Keller. Let's turn back to the Denise Williams case, the case that we're giving you an in-depth look at here on the Law and Crime Network. We're just going over the Brian Winchester testimony. He's the key witness in all of this, pointing the finger at his former girlfriend, Denise Williams, who he says plotted this murder of her husband in order to get the insurance money and so they could live happily ever after. Well, you ask, what is the evidence that backs up Brian Winchester's story? That's exactly what the prosecution was trying to get at during the closing arguments. Let's take a listen to a bit of what they had to say about that. Okay, something about this guy's testimony. I can't put my finger on it, Marni Jo Snyder, but it's just not sitting well with me.
I think he says very strange things, right? He gives these really huge, wonderful explanations for why he was driving the boat, but they were friends. Who cares who's driving the boat? You know what I mean? Like but he doesn't know why the person that he loves and talks to all the time wouldn't just divorce her husband. So it just seems that he has a lot of details about things that don't matter to me as someone who's trying to figure out whether Denise Williams was part of this. He also seems to be the worst murderer ever. He is trying to weigh down his friend.
But if he is a murderer, he got away with it for 18 years.
Right, but he's serving 20. So we're got to give him something. But like he wants to throw his friend, who is used to being a fisherman and knows what waiters are and knows how they operate, and put on his own waiters. He thinks that he's going to throw him off the boat, and that's going to be the thing that does it. The whole plan seems very strange, and I would think that if two people were thinking this through and plotting it, like he says, they wouldn't have come up with this as their big plan.
Well, I guess he brought
strange.
his gun along as insurance, as an insurance
Right.
policy, just in case pushing him off the boat didn't get the job done there.
He was willing to bring a gun and shoot his friend, but that's not how he was willing to plot it out to begin with. It sounds very strange.
Well, all right, we're going to continue taking a deep dive into this case. We have to take a quick break here on the Law and Crime Network, but we'll be back in just a few minutes. And welcome back to the Law and Crime Trial Network. I'm your host for the rest of the afternoon, Rachel Stockman, and we were just taking a deep dive into the Denise Williams case, speaking with the prosecutor who tried the case, had been on the case for many years. And one of the interesting things that we really honed in on was Brian Winchester, who was the key witness in all of this, allegedly, well, admitting to conspiring with Denise Williams to kill her husband. Marni Snyder, she's a criminal defense attorney. She was standing by listening to the interview. I found it pretty interesting that, you know, and I think this came out during trial, but for him to really say that the motive of Brian Winchester to do this killing was purely love. Purely love. He didn't sound that in love during the testimony.
Right. I think that what he means is that the main intention was love, in that they didn't have a barter for the or some sort of agreement for the amount of money. I think Mr. Winchester was actually pretty upfront that he might enjoy being with her with this money, but that he didn't get a cut. And so I think I think it's important, because if he conflated those two, maybe it would have been confusing for the jury.
And, you know, I think he really did help make sense for me, those threesome photos, or photos of Denise Williams, Brian Winchester's wife, making out. I wasn't quite sure why they were brought in, but it makes sense because the defense the whole time was trying to say, wait a sec, Brian and Denise didn't even have a relationship. Well, you show photos of the three of them having some kind of sexual activity, all of a sudden that whole story is blown out of the water there.
Right. That was really helpful. I thought listening to his whole interview with you was great, because I think I have a big dislike for Brian Winchester. But
Me too.
But listening to him talk about it, I really appreciate it. And I loved how he said, I have a pet peeve with prosecutors that say corroboration, when it doesn't corroborate the main issue.
I hate that word so much. In fact, I refuse to say it. I say people don't say that. They back up, prove. Yeah, anyway, keep going. Yep.
Right. Well, that's what he did. He used the words due diligence. We did our due diligence as investigators and prosecutors, and I really respected that statement. And what he said today made a lot of sense for me, so I appreciated hearing all of that.
Okay, let's switch gears now to the Jason Van Dyke case. He is going to be sentenced next month after a judge turned down his bid to get the charges set aside, the conviction set aside, and for him to get a new trial. That's that's video, I should say, from a hearing on Friday. And take a look at him. He looks totally different than he did during the trial. Looks like maybe a little slimmer. He's got his jail garb on, and he also has a lot of facial hair. It's very interesting what 2 months in prison will do. But of course, the crux of the hearing that we carried live here on the Law and Crime Network on Friday was whether Jason Van Dyke was justified, and whether Laquan McDonald, the victim, the teenager, the black teenager in this case, was coming at him like he said. So let's listen to some testimony from a use of force expert from Jason Van Dyke's trial, and then we're going to talk about that motion. Take a listen. There you can see the defense is really talking about how they were, how the video doesn't exactly show what the expert there described, and taking issue, saying that they believe Laquan McDonald was advancing, at least from Jason Van Dyke's perspective, onto Jason Van Dyke when shots were fired. What do you make of this motion? I mean, obviously we know the judge denied it, but was it a good attempt?
I think any attempt on behalf of a defendant who you believe is wrongfully convicted is an honorable attempt. But I don't really see where they thought they had a real shot of winning. It seems like they were just trying to relitigate the case and say that their witnesses were better than the video. I think that what happened is the jury did not believe, no matter who said it, that Laquan McDonald was closing the distance towards Jason Van Dyke. And I also disagree with their statement that saying if he closes the distance at all, even for a second, then it is a justified shooting and the case is totally broken down. That's not really the standard for using excessive force, nor is it the standard for murder.
So let's listen to then what the prosecution's response to all this was. Okay, so that's the prosecution's rebuttal to the defense's attempt to get this trial, get the verdict, the guilty verdict for second-degree murder set aside. Marni, Joe, your reaction really quickly.
I think the prosecutor was right. You can't just retry the case in a post-trial motion.
Because this was really a factual issue that the defense was debating. That's for a jury to decide, not an appellate court.
Absolutely.
All right, so we have got to take a quick break here on the Law and Crime Network, but when we come back, we have a breaking update on a related case to the Jason Van Dyke trial. 3 officers also facing separate charges in a cover-up. We have new information about when that verdict is coming up. We'll bring it to you coming up on the Law and Crime Network. Stay with us. Some breaking news in a case that we've been following here in the Law and Crime Network. Those 3 Chicago cops who are facing charges for allegedly covering up for one of their own. We had gotten word that the verdict in that case, it was a bench trial, was going to be announced on Wednesday, but we just found out moments ago, for whatever reason we don't know yet, the judge has postponed her decision, and instead on Wednesday we're going to have court starting at 12 o'clock. So there could be some last-minute motions in the case. We're working to get some more information, and we'll bring it to you just as soon as we can. Really quickly, Marni, Joe, do you think that could be anything significant? Because the judge has already had quite a bit of time to decide how this verdict is going to come out.
Right. It's very strange to continue it. I don't know that I know what it means.
Do you think overall, though, it was a smart decision to go with a bench trial in a case like this as opposed to having a jury of their peers deciding a case, this case?
I think there must be something about the judge's disposition or the way that certain evidence was going in at trial that made the defense pick that as a way to do it. When the judge first continued the verdict to be read today instead of the same day as all the evidence, that I thought was meaningful, that maybe it was going to be a guilty verdict and she didn't want all the brother officers that had been there to watch in the room. I wasn't really sure what that meant.
And of course, these cops are charged with falsifying reports to make it look like the teen was aggressively going towards Jason Van Dyke, so therefore he was justified in opening fire. So in case you haven't been following very closely about these 3 cops on trial specifically, let's take a look at what they're facing.
Chicago police officers are facing obstruction of justice and conspiracy charges for reportedly lying about the shooting death of a black teenager. Prosecutors say former Detective David March, Officer Thomas Gaffney, and former officer Joseph Walsh intentionally attempted to conceal the facts of the killing of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald. Laquan was shot and killed by the trio's colleague, Jason Van Dyke. Van Dyke was indicted in 2015 for shooting the victim 16 times. He took the stand in his trial and claimed that he shot because the victim, who was holding a knife, was coming towards him.
What was Laquan McDonald doing?
Advancing on me.
And did you say anything to Laquan McDonald?
I was yelling at him, drop the knife. I yelled it, I don't know how many times, but that's all I yelled.
And did he keep advancing toward you?
He never stopped. He waved the knife from his lower right side upwards, across his body, towards my left shoulder.
And when he did that, what did you do, officer?
I shot him.
But some state witnesses had a different story.
Before you see him fall, did you see him raise his arm as if he was attempting to stab anyone?
No.
Did you see him attack anyone?
No.
Did you see him walk, run, or charge at any officers?
No.
Van Dyke was found guilty in October of second-degree murder and 1 count of aggravated battery for each of the 16 shots. He was acquitted of official misconduct. Court documents accuse March, Walsh, and Gaffney of a medley of crimes, including mischaracterizing video recordings, creating false police reports, and failing to report false information in order to protect themselves and Van Dyke. The indictment claims that Walsh, Gaffney, and another unknown person reported they were victims of McDonald, and another unnamed person was injured by the offender. That claim was allegedly reviewed and submitted by Detective March. It also says a reported false claim attributed to Officer Walsh stated that the victim attempted to get back up after being shot while still holding the knife. Claims that the video evidence of the shooting does not support. All the officers entered a not guilty plea to the charges. For Law and Crime, I'm Rachel Stockman.
And of course, this was a bench trial, and we were covering this case gavel to gavel, also listening to the prosecution's closings that give a kind of good overview of where they came at this case. Take a listen. Okay, so that is the attorney for Detective March, who is the lead detective in this case. He's obviously very fiery, he's very worked up, and he's very much in the blame the victim mindset here. Marni Snyder, criminal defense attorney, she's been with me all afternoon, and I wish we had a little toolbox during that playback of those closings from the defense, because Marni, you were almost having a meltdown over there, huh?
Yeah, I'm shocked for so many reasons. I'm really shocked that he is doing the blame the victim game. When the video very clearly didn't show Laquan McDonald advancing on anyone, assaulting anyone, and committing crime. So I'm just surprised that he didn't characterize this more as perspective. Police officers having different perspectives, police officers thinking that their lives are in danger, trying to do their job, which I'm not sure the video supports either. But that would have been the argument. The other thing is, when you've been around a courthouse for a long time, the judges know when you're feigning, this kind of outrage, when you're absolutely serious, and they think about your credibility in those cases. You never sacrifice one client for another, but you build that reputation over time. So I'm just surprised in a bench trial he was that fiery.
Yeah, again, because he's not playing to a jury here, and there's one of the defendants there. He's not playing to a jury, he's playing to the judge. So a lot of times in those kind of cases, you really see the attorneys calm down their act a little bit, because they know the audience is a judge, not a jury, who's not necessarily, wants this drama. Really quickly, how do you think the judge is going to decide? We only have a few seconds.
I think it's going to be a guilty verdict. I don't see how it wouldn't be, but I didn't sit in there the whole time. And nor do I know the climate in which this judge is reacting.
Marni Snyder, you're going to stick around for the daily debrief. That's next. Thanks so much for joining us here on our brand new set, the first day here on the Law&Crime Network.